There's two brand new sports cars I'm super excited about that are coming out soon. There's the 2023 Nissan Z, and of course there's the 2023 Civic Type R. And they're both at about $40,000 entry level. So if you got $40,000-ish to spend, which one should you spend your money on? That's what we're going to look at today. So it's time for a little Japanese car battle. Now, of course, there's going to be dealer markup on both of these. There's nothing that I can really do to sort of adjust the comparison. Now, the Civic Type R, we don't exactly have the pricing on it yet. We think it's going to start at around $40,000 because the current one starts at a little under $40,000. So I think they're going to add about $1,000 to $2,000 for the new one. And the Nissan Z, we do have pricing. It starts at $40,000 for the Sport. And if you want the performance, that goes up to $50,000. So how do these two cars stack up against each other? Now, there's obviously a couple of big differences here, which is why I think this is an interesting comparison, even though they're coming in at a similar price point. So the Nissan Z is obviously a two-door coupe, and it is relatively small. It's not very practical in terms of cargo space. I don't know what the cargo space is back there, but it's super tiny. I'm guessing it's maybe 5 to 6 cubic feet. It is really, really small. It's just a two-seater. And the Civic Type R is obviously a rather large four-door. You might be actually surprised at how large it is. So it is based, of course, on the 11th generation Civic. We can sort of deduce what the specs are going to be from the current one, even though Honda hasn't released all the specs yet. And I asked them, and they're very cagey about it. Now, they're both available in manual transmission. Hallelujah. Gotta love the manuals. But the Z is available also with a 9-speed automatic, and I believe it's a no-cost option. So the Z has 400 horsepower, and I've already done a video on this, a couple of videos comparing the Supra to the Z, so you can go check that out later. And in the Civic Type R, we do have the same engine and transmission that we had before, even though the transmission linkage feels a little bit revised to me. We've got essentially a carryover drivetrain, and this has already been confirmed. So we're talking about a 2-liter turbo. We don't have a power number. Honda says it's going to be the most powerful Civic Type R yet. The current one's at 306, so I'm guessing 320 because Honda doesn't do crazy things. And right now we stand at 295 pound-feet of torque. I'm thinking it's going to be a little bit less than 320. Again, just my guess. So the design is actually kind of controversial on both of them. I did a little poll recently on the Civic Type R on my page, and I asked people, did they like the FK8, the last generation styling, better, or the new FL5? And the answer is actually kind of surprising. 81% of people preferred the new FL5. And I ran the same thing on my Instagram, pretty similar. So there's a lot of people that really like the last generation, even though the new generation is kind of smoothed out and much more refined looking. It's a little bit more relaxed, actually way less boy racer. So let me know in the comments what you guys think of that. And then, of course, over to the Nissan Z, which is a completely different animal. It has the katana sword and this swoosh going sort of all the way down along the roof line, all the way into the rear fenders, over the rear fenders. And of course, it's a classic two-door sports car. It has a lot of cues to the past. Nissan made this very, very strong, very apparent. They really wanted to harken back to the 240Z and also the 300Z in the rear too. So it's sort of an amalgamation of different Zs from the past. And I think the rear is very successful. I'm not too crazy about the nose personally. I think the profile is pretty good. So again, let me know what you think of that. Let me know what you think of these cars side by side. So obviously very different missions of these two cars. So with the Civic Type R, in terms of the weight, I think the best thing we can do is look at the hatchback that is in just the regular Honda Civic for weight numbers, because I think it's going to be pretty close to the Touring. It might be a little bit heavier. Currently the Touring weighs about 3,100 pounds. And if we go over to the Nissan Z, we're talking about 3,500 to 3,600 pounds depending on trim level. The automatic with the Performance Edition is going to be a little bit higher than that, up around the 3,600 level. So we're talking about roughly a 400 to 500 pound difference is my best guess. So when you look at the power to weight ratio, the Civic Type R is going to be somewhere around 9.6 pounds per horsepower is my best guess, whereas the Z is going to be somewhere around 8.75 to 9 pounds per horsepower. But which one is going to be faster in a straight line? I think there's really not a lot of question about that. I think we're looking at the Honda Civic Type R being in the 5-ish second range, something like that, where the Z is definitely going to be faster than that. We're talking about low 4s, most likely in the real world. Motor Trend tested the Z with an automatic, and they came in at about 4.3 seconds, 0 to 60. Quarter miles around 12.9 at 107.6, whereas the Civic Type R, we're looking at probably low 5 seconds. It's a difference in philosophy, it's probably a difference in gearing, and here's one thing that you can't get in the Civic Type R, and that is an automatic transmission. There is no automatic transmission for this platform. There's no DCT. All we have is a CVT, and obviously Honda didn't want to put that into a performance car. I know Subaru tends to think a little bit differently about that in terms of the WRX, but I'm all for not putting a CVT into that car because it's a great transmission. It's a great manual transmission. I have driven the Z, compared it back to back with the Supra with the manual. Now, I haven't driven the new Civic Type R, I should say, but I have shifted it sitting while it's parked in an airplane hangar, and the shifter does feel really good. It actually feels better than the Z, in my opinion. The Z was not bad for a manual transmission, but also not great either. I think it's sort of somewhere in the middle. If that's really important to you and you care about feel, you should definitely drive them back to back. Now, which car is actually newer? Even though they're both 2023 models, the Nissan Z is really based on the FM platform, which has been around for a while. So the 2023 Z is based sort of on the 370Z. It actually sits on the same wheelbase, and it's the same length. The wheelbase is the exact same size. Dimensionally, it's a little bit longer. The 370Z was based on the 350Z. So it's actually been around for 15 years, something like that, quite a while, maybe even longer, whereas the Honda Civic is based on this new platform that they've come out with just this year for all the 2022 models. And it's a brand new platform. It feels really good. It's really rigid. It is very, very tight feeling. And having driven the normal Honda Civic Si, the new version, versus the Nissan Z, I can say that it is a stiffer body structure. There's no question in my mind. It's a stiffer body structure. It's more refined. It's more modern. That's just sort of the way it is. And so the interior fit and finish, there's really no comparison in my mind. The new Honda Civic has what I think is a fantastic interior. They did a complete redesign for this new generation. It has these amazing vents, this honeycomb vents that go all the way across the dash. It has beautiful physical controls with a nice little click in it. And on the display for the Type R, they've got a custom display for it. It's a pretty bright, I think it's a TFT or an LCD, I forget, but it is very bright. It is very easy to look at. It's very nice, and just overall, the materials and the fit and finish in the Honda are super high quality. It is really top of the class, whereas the Z is sort of a warmed over 370Z. Now, it's not terrible, but the fit and finish is okay. It has some nice Alcantara. The seats are pretty comfortable, but the dashboard is pretty basic, and it's sort of, it's nice, but it is a little bit warmed over 370Z. It's definitely not the pinnacle of modern manufacturing. The display screen in the Z is very good. It's very bright. There's a lot of information there. I think it's really good. It's really configurable. That's definitely an asset to it. But overall, it's just not as expensive feeling as the Civic. So wheels and tires. So actually the Honda Civic used to have 20 inches on the last generation Civic Type R, and now they've gone back down to 19s, but it is 265s all the way around. And those are some pretty big, chunky, meaty tires. You're going to get a lot of lateral grip. Honda says this is going to have the most performance of any Civic Type R, and that's definitely going to be including the braking and the lateral grip, just the mechanical grip overall. And the Z at $40,000, at the entry level, you're getting 18-inch wheels and tires, and they're 245s front and back. If you move up to the performance, we're talking about 255 in the front and 275 in the back. And they both have relatively sticky tires. And on the entry-level Z, you've got some smaller brakes, but on the bigger Z and the performance, you've got 4-piston Brembos, which you also have on the Civic Type R. So kind of a tie there, although we're getting up into the more expensive part of the Z. There's a couple things to think about with the Z. For $40,000, it's the entry level. you get smaller brakes and you don't get a limited slip differential in it, which is kind of a big deal, but maybe it's not a big deal depending on how you want to drive the car. If you want to do some looks mod, you want to stance it, you want to drive around town and just put a crazy big wing on it, you don't really need the differential. Now, the Civic Type R does have a differential, and they have a really clever way of putting down the power. There's almost no torque steer in this thing, and it feels like a front-wheel drive, but also not in a way. It's very, very, very sophisticated in terms of the ride and the handling. The ride in the Z is pretty good. It's I would say it's definitely a little bit softer than the Supra. The ride quality is quite good. I understand in the track, perhaps it could use a little higher shock valving. Now the Civic Type R is definitely going to be good on the track. Obviously I haven't driven the new one. The ride quality in the current one is excellent, and I've driven it on track and it's really, really good too. But the big difference here, I think, that we're really talking about is the mission and intent of these cars. If you can only have one car, it's got to be the Civic, because it is hugely practical. If you're thinking about maybe, I should get a little SUV and something else like the Civic Type R, you actually don't need it, because the Civic Type R actually has a massive cargo space in the back with the hatchback. In fact, I have looked up the numbers, and it has got the same amount of space as the Lexus NX 350, if you can believe that, which is a compact SUV. With the seats up and with the seats down, the amount of space you get is almost identical. With the Z, we're talking about, I don't know what the cargo space is, but I'm guessing it's like 5 or 6 cubic feet, something like that. It's pretty much just a travel bag for the weekend. It's not really a practical car in that kind of sense. You sort of have to have another car. So there's going to be press drives coming up with the Civic Type R in the next couple of months. But what I'm really excited about right now in the Japanese affordable sports car market is we have things like the GR86 and the BRZ twins that are, you can get them now. We've got the new Z, we've got the new Civic Type R. There's a lot of exciting, and of course the Miata, there's a lot of really exciting things in the sort of sub $40,000 space right now, which I think is really great. And then if you like domestics, Mustang, the new Ford Mustang is going to be launched on September 14th at the Detroit Auto Show. I'll be there, of course, checking that out if you want sort of a different formula. So obviously these cars have got different missions, but I want to know what you think of them. So let me know in the comments, Civic Type R or Nissan Z, which one would you buy? And I got a video right over here on the Honda Civic Type R.